The conference room felt smaller than usual that Tuesday morning. Charlotte Hastings, the CEO's daughter, stood at the head of the mahogany table with her arms crossed, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor as she paced. Her eyes landed on me with the kind of disdain usually reserved for week-old takeout. "Let's be honest, Evelyn," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You're dead weight. Luggage from my father's era. It's time to clear the air and make room for fresh talent." 23 years of 80-hour weeks. 23 years of building systems, developing relationships, turning a struggling tech startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire. And this 32-year-old woman, who'd been handed her position 3 months ago when her father retired, just called me luggage. "You're terminated. Effective immediately," Charlotte continued, sliding a severance packet across the table. "Security will escort you out. Clean out your desk by noon." I looked down at the packet. Standard termination. Nothing extraordinary. She had no idea what was coming. Before we go further, if this story resonates with you, I'd appreciate your support by hitting that subscribe button. We just completed our first milestone together, and now we're working toward reaching 2,000 subscribers. Your subscription means we can continue bringing these stories to life. Now, let's get back to what happened. My name is Evelyn Margaret Torres, and until that moment, I held the title of Chief Operating Officer at Thornfield Technologies. But titles only tell part of the story. I grew up in a household where dinner table conversations revolved around making ends meet, where my mother worked 2 jobs to keep us fed, and my father spent his evenings repairing neighbors' electronics for extra cash. They taught me the value of every dollar, every hour, every opportunity. I wasn't born into poverty, but I was raised with an understanding that nothing comes easy, and everything worth having requires sacrifice. My parents gave me something more valuable than wealth. They gave me perspective, empathy, and an unshakable work ethic. I started at Thornfield Technologies 23 years ago as an administrative assistant. The company was barely afloat then, just 12 employees working out of a converted warehouse in Seattle. The founder, Richard Hastings, Charlotte's father, had vision, but lacked execution. He had ideas, but needed someone to transform those ideas into operational reality. That someone became me. The first year, I worked 90-hour weeks, not because Richard demanded it, but because I saw potential. I reorganized the supply chain, implemented project management systems, and personally handled client relations when we couldn't afford a dedicated sales team. I learned the business from the ground up, literally from the ground floor of that warehouse. By year 3, we'd grown to 50 employees. Richard promoted me to operations manager. By year 5, we'd gone public, and I became director of operations. The IPO was modest, but it was a start. Richard offered me stock options as part of my compensation package. Most people cashed out immediately. I didn't. I believed in what we were building. More than that, I understood the numbers. I'd spent countless nights analyzing our financial projections, our market position, our competitive advantages. Thornfield wasn't just going to survive, it was going to dominate. So instead of cashing out, I held on to every share. And whenever I received dividends, I bought more stock. When the market dipped and others panicked, I bought more. When quarterly reports showed strong growth and stock prices rose, I sold high and waited for corrections to buy back in at lower prices. For 23 years, this was my strategy. Live modestly, invest aggressively, believe in the company I was helping build. My friends bought houses in exclusive neighborhoods. I rented a comfortable apartment. They drove luxury cars. I drove a reliable Honda. They vacationed in Europe. I spent weekends reviewing operational reports and planning quarterly strategies. Some called it obsession. I called it dedication. Richard noticed. He wasn't just a visionary, he was observant. He saw how I'd transformed his scattered ideas into streamlined processes. He saw how I'd negotiated contracts that saved millions.
He saw how I'd built a corporate culture that attracted top talent and maintained low turnover.
He promoted me to vice president of operations, then executive vice president, and finally, 12 years ago, to chief operating officer. I was the first woman in the company's history to hold a C-suite position. More importantly, I was the person who made sure the company actually functioned while everyone else was chasing the next big innovation. But Richard never knew about my stock accumulation. Nobody did. It wasn't a secret, exactly. All my purchases were properly filed with the SEC, completely legal and transparent. But in a company with thousands of shareholders and millions of traded shares, nobody was paying attention to the steady, methodical purchasing pattern of one executive buying small quantities consistently over 2 decades. By year 15, I owned 8% of the company. By year 20, I'd crossed 15%. And 6 months ago, through a carefully structured purchase of shares from a retiring board member, I crossed the 55% threshold. I became the majority shareholder of Thornfield Technologies. The SEC filings were completed. The documentation was flawless. Everything was legal, proper, and recorded. But in the chaos of Richard's retirement announcement and Charlotte's transition to CEO, nobody in the executive suite bothered to check the updated shareholder registry. Nobody except me and my attorney, Monica Chen, who'd helped structure the transactions to ensure complete compliance with securities regulations. Charlotte Hastings became CEO through birthright, not merit. Richard had always been somewhat traditional in his thinking. He wanted to keep the company in the family. He'd groomed Charlotte for years, bringing her into the business, giving her positions she hadn't earned, hoping she'd develop the instincts needed to run a multi-billion-dollar corporation. She hadn't. Charlotte had an MBA from an expensive school, connections from her wealthy upbringing, and confidence that came from never being told no. What she lacked was operational understanding, strategic thinking, and the basic human decency to respect the people who'd built the foundation she was standing on. Her first month as CEO, she redecorated the executive floor. Cost? $2.3 million. Her second month, she hired 6 consultants from her business school network, each paid more than our senior engineers. Her third month, she started talking about restructuring and bringing in fresh perspectives. I knew what that meant. I'd seen it before in other companies. The new executive comes in, dismisses the old guard, brings in their own people, takes credit for existing systems, and blames any problems on the previous regime. I'd started preparing for this possibility the moment Richard announced his retirement. I documented every system I'd built, every process I'd implemented, every relationship I'd cultivated. I'd quietly backed up files, saved emails, and created a comprehensive record of my contributions to the company. Not because I was paranoid, because I was prepared. That Tuesday morning when Charlotte called me luggage, I wasn't surprised. I was disappointed, but not surprised. "Do you have any questions?" Charlotte asked, clearly expecting me to simply accept the termination and leave quietly. I stood up slowly, gathering the severance packet. "Just one. Have you reviewed the updated shareholder registry recently?" She blinked, confused. "What does that have to do with your termination?" "Everything," I said calmly. "But you'll figure it out soon enough. I'll have my desk cleared by noon, as requested." I walked out of that conference room with my head high, leaving Charlotte looking puzzled but triumphant. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd successfully removed an obstacle to her vision for the company. She had no idea she'd just fired her boss. The news spread through the office within an hour. Evelyn Torres, the COO who'd been with the company for 23 years, had been terminated. The reactions varied. Some people were shocked, some were angry, some started immediately updating their resumes, knowing that if I could be fired without warning, anyone could. I spent the next 2 hours in my office, not packing personal items, but reviewing documents. My assistant, Jennifer Wu, knocked softly on my door around 10:30. "Evelyn, I don't understand," she said, her eyes red from crying. "How can they do this? You built this place." Jennifer had been with me for 8 years. I'd hired her straight out of college, mentored her, watched her grow from an uncertain graduate into a confident professional. She reminded me of myself at that age, hungry, dedicated, willing to learn. "Sometimes things happen that don't make sense in the moment," I told her, "but they have a way of working themselves out. Trust me." "Is there anything I can do?" "Actually, yes. Can you schedule a meeting for me with Monica Chen this afternoon? And I'll need you to compile the contact information for all board members. Send it to my personal email." Jennifer nodded, wiping her eyes. "You're gonna fight this, aren't you?" I smiled. "I'm going to correct a misunderstanding." By 11:30, I'd finished my review. Everything was in order. Every document was saved to secure cloud storage. Every contact was backed up. Every piece of evidence was organized and ready. At 11:45, I walked through the office for the last time as a terminated employee. People stopped working to watch. Some offered quiet words of support. Others looked away, uncomfortable or afraid of being associated with someone who'd just been fired. I understood. Fear makes people cautious. But I wasn't afraid. The security guard, Tom Williams, escorted me to the front entrance. He'd been with the company for 15 years. We'd worked together on security protocol updates, emergency procedures, and facility improvements. "This is wrong, Miss Torres," he said quietly as we reached the door. "Everyone knows it." "Sometimes wrong things happen so right things can follow," I told him. "Take care, Tom." I walked out of Thornfield Technologies at exactly noon, carrying... Monica was waiting for me at a cafe 3 blocks away. She'd ordered my usual, black coffee and a turkey sandwich. Her laptop was already open, documents pulled up on the screen. "I saw the termination letter you forwarded," Monica said as I sat down. "Charlotte has no idea what she's done, does she?" "Not yet, but she will." Monica turned her laptop toward me. "I've reviewed all the filings again. Everything is absolutely solid. You own 55.3% of Thornfield Technologies. As majority shareholder, you have the right to call a special meeting of the board and vote on any matter, including executive appointments." "Timeline?" I asked. "We can have notice sent to all board members today. Washington state law requires 10 days notice for a special meeting, so we're looking at 2 weeks from today, maximum." "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, you're unemployed. Charlotte will start implementing whatever changes she has planned, which, based on the consulting reports she's commissioned, probably includes replacing several senior executives with her own people." I sipped my coffee. Let her. Every move she makes will just demonstrate why the board needs to reconsider the leadership structure. Monica smiled. "Most people in your position would be angry. You seem completely calm." "I am calm. Anger would cloud my judgment. This isn't personal. It's business. Charlotte made a business decision based on incomplete information. I'm about to make a business decision based on complete information." "What outcome are you hoping for?" I considered the question carefully. I don't want Charlotte destroyed. She's young, inexperienced, but not incompetent. She could be good at this job eventually. What I want is for the company to be protected. Richard built something meaningful. I helped turn it into something exceptional. I won't let it be dismantled by impulsive decision-making and ego. Monica drafted the notice for the special board meeting. The language was clear and formal. Evelyn Margaret Torres, majority shareholder of Thornfield Technologies, was calling a special meeting to address concerns regarding company leadership and strategic direction. The notices went out at 2 p.m. that afternoon. By 2:30, my personal phone started ringing. The first call was from Benjamin Foster, the longest-serving board member besides Richard himself. Benjamin had been an early investor, and he'd watched the company grow from that converted warehouse to its current headquarters spanning 3 buildings. "Evelyn, I just received the most interesting notice," he said, his voice a mixture of surprise and amusement. "When exactly did you become the majority shareholder?" "6 months ago, though the accumulation process started 23 years ago." He laughed, a deep, genuine sound. "You've been buying stock this whole time? Right under everyone's nose?" "Not under anyone's nose. Every purchase was properly filed and recorded. People just weren't looking." "And now Charlotte has terminated you." "She has." "This is going to be quite a meeting. I wouldn't miss it for anything." The second call came from Natalie Brooks, the board member who headed the compensation committee. She was less amused and more concerned. "Evelyn, what's going on? Charlotte sent out a memo this afternoon saying she's restructuring the executive team. She's planning to terminate 3 more C-suite officers next week. And now I find out she's fired you? And you're actually the majority shareholder?" "That's an accurate summary." "How did Richard not know about this?" "Richard never asked to see the detailed shareholder registry. He knew I held stock, of course. He'd approved my option packages and knew I was reinvesting dividends. But he probably assumed I owned 1 or 2%, maybe 5 at most. He certainly never imagined I'd systematically built a majority position." "And Charlotte?" "Charlotte hasn't looked at anything that existed before she took over. She's focused on the future, not the foundation." Natalie sighed. "What are you planning to do with this meeting?" "Whatever is in the best interest of the company and its employees." The calls continued throughout the afternoon. 8 of the 12 board members contacted me directly. Not one of them had realized I was the majority shareholder. Not one of them had thought to check the updated registry. Charlotte, meanwhile, was having a very different afternoon. According to Jennifer, who texted me updates despite having been told not to communicate with me, Charlotte spent the first hour after the board meeting notices went out in confused phone calls with the company's corporate attorney, Lawrence Hammond. Lawrence had apparently pulled up the shareholder registry and confirmed what the notices claimed. Evelyn Torres owned 55.3% of Thornfield Technologies. Charlotte's response, according to Jennifer's source in the legal department, had been immediate and loud. "How is that possible? How did this happen? Why wasn't I informed?" Lawrence had apparently explained the basics. Stock purchases are public record through SEC filings, but unless someone is specifically monitoring for accumulation patterns, a slow, steady buildup over decades can go unnoticed, especially in a company with active trading and thousands of shareholders. Charlotte's second response was to call her father. Richard Hastings had retired to a ranch in Montana, deliberately choosing a location with limited cell service and no interest in daily business operations. He'd spent 40 years building Thornfield Technologies. He was done. He wanted to fish, read, and enjoy his retirement. But he still answered his daughter's call. I know this because Richard called me that evening. "Evelyn," he said, his voice warm but tired, "Charlotte is very upset." "I imagine she is. She says you've been secretly buying stock to stage some kind of hostile takeover." "There's nothing secret or hostile about it. Every purchase was properly documented and filed. And I didn't take over anything. I've been an owner for 23 years. I just gradually became a majority owner." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would it have changed anything?" Another pause. "I suppose not. You earned your position through merit. Your stock ownership was your private business decision. I respected your work, regardless of how many shares you held." "Exactly. But Richard, I need you to understand something. Charlotte fired me this morning. She called me luggage from your era. She said I was dead weight that needed to be cleared out." "She what?" His voice shifted from tired to sharp. "She terminated me, effective immediately, security escort and everything. Richard let out a long breath. Evelyn, I'm sorry. Charlotte she's confident, but she lacks judgment sometimes. I'd hoped the CEO position would temper that, give her perspective. She's been CEO for 3 months. She hasn't had time to develop perspective, but she has had time to make decisions that could seriously damage the company you spent 4 decades building. What are you going to do? It was the question everyone was asking. What was I going to do? I'm going to protect Thornfield Technologies, I said simply. Exactly how I do that, I'm still deciding. You could vote her out entirely. As majority shareholder, you could install yourself as CEO. I could, but is that what's best for the company? That, Richard said slowly, is the question I used to ask you about every major decision. And your answer was always the same. Look at the data, consider the long-term implications, and choose the path that ensures sustainable growth. Some lessons stick. Charlotte needs to learn those lessons. But Evelyn, she's my daughter. I'm not asking you to spare her. I know you'll do whatever is right for the company. I'm just asking you to remember she's still learning. I remember being young and confident and certain I knew better than everyone else. Someone gave me a chance to learn instead of just being dismissed. I remember that too. Thank you, Richard said quietly, for everything you've built, everything you've done, and whatever you're about to do. The 2 weeks before the board meeting were revealing. Charlotte, panicked by the revelation of my majority ownership, made a series of increasingly desperate moves. First, she tried to rally the board members against me, sending lengthy emails about rogue shareholders and corporate coups. Most board members ignored these emails or forwarded them to me with subject lines like, "Is she serious?" Second, she hired 3 additional consultants to review company operations and provide recommendations for necessary changes. These consultants, none of whom had tech industry experience, produced reports suggesting we eliminate several departments and outsource core functions to reduce overhead. Third, she attempted to implement an emergency compensation restructure that would have given executives golden parachutes in the event of leadership changes, essentially trying to make it financially devastating for me to remove her. Lawrence Hammond, to his credit, blocked this third move, explaining that such changes required board approval and couldn't be implemented by executive order. Fourth, Charlotte called an all-hands meeting to address rumors and concerns. Jennifer sent me the video. Someone had live-streamed it. Charlotte stood in the main auditorium, looking every bit the confident CEO in her tailored suit and practiced smile. "I know there's been uncertainty this week," she told the assembled employees. "Change is always uncomfortable, but I want to assure you that Thornfield Technologies is heading in an exciting new direction. The old guard, the people who've been here for decades, they built a strong foundation. We thank them for that, but foundations are meant to be built upon, not worshipped." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Where's Evelyn?" Charlotte's smile tightened. "Personnel decisions are confidential. What I can tell you is that we're bringing in fresh talent, new perspectives, and innovative approaches. Some of you will be part of that future. Some of you won't. That's the reality of business evolution." The room went quiet. That was a threat, and everyone knew it. Charlotte continued. "In particular, I want to address the rumors about stock ownership and board meetings. Yes, it turns out that our former COO acquired a significant amount of stock over the years. That's her right as an investor. But owning stock doesn't qualify someone to run a company. Leadership requires vision, innovation, and the courage to make difficult decisions. Those are the qualities I bring to this role." She paused, clearly expecting applause. The room remained silent. "The board meeting next week is a formality," Charlotte said, her voice gaining an edge. "Some people don't know when it's time to move on. They cling to the past, to positions they've outgrown, to companies that have evolved beyond them. That's sad, but it won't change the trajectory we're on. This company is mine now. My father built it, and he entrusted it to me. That's not changing. The meeting ended awkwardly, with employees filing out in uncomfortable silence. Jennifer texted me immediately. She has no idea, does she? I replied, not yet. The morning of the board meeting arrived cold and clear. January in Seattle meant gray skies and persistent drizzle, but that Tuesday dawned with rare sunshine, as if the weather itself wanted a clear view of what was about to happen. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the Thornfield Technologies headquarters, in the executive boardroom on the 23rd floor. I arrived at 9:30, dressed in the same professional style I'd maintained for 23 years. Tailored navy suit, simple jewelry, confident, but not flashy. The receptionist, Amy Chen, looked startled to see me. Miss Torres, we heard. I'm here for the board meeting, Amy. I'm still a shareholder. Of course, the boardroom is ready. Coffee and refreshments are set up. I took the elevator to the 23rd floor. The executive level had indeed been completely redecorated in Charlotte's preferred style. Modern, minimalist, expensive. The warm, collaborative space that used to exist had been replaced with cold elegance. Benjamin Foster was already in the boardroom, reviewing documents. He looked up when I entered and smiled broadly.
Evelyn, good to see you. How does it feel to be back in the building? Familiar, though the decor has changed. $2.3 million worth of change, according to the expenses I reviewed. But who's counting? Other board members began arriving. Natalie Brooks, followed by James Thornton, Lisa Anderson, and Robert Yang. Each greeted me warmly, some with obvious curiosity about what was going to happen. By 9:55, all 12 board members had arrived. Charlotte entered at exactly 10, flanked by Lawrence Hammond and 2 of her newly hired consultants. She stopped short when she saw me sitting at the table. "What is she doing here?" Charlotte demanded, looking at Lawrence. "Ms. Torres is the majority shareholder," Lawrence said calmly. "She called this meeting. She has every right to be present. This is my boardroom, my company." Benjamin Foster cleared his throat. "Actually, Charlotte, it's the company's boardroom. And technically, it's Evelyn's company. She owns 55.3% of it. Shall we begin?" Charlotte's face flushed, but she took her seat at the head of the table. I sat at the opposite end, calm and prepared. Benjamin, as the senior board member, called the meeting to order. This special meeting of the Thornfield Technologies Board of Directors has been called by majority shareholder Evelyn Torres to address concerns regarding company leadership and strategic direction. Evelyn, you have the floor. I stood, pulling up a presentation on the main screen. Thank you, Benjamin. I'll keep this brief and focused on facts. The first slide showed a timeline of my employment at Thornfield Technologies. 23 years, starting as administrative assistant, progressing through 8 positions, culminating in COO. The second slide showed key company metrics during my tenure: revenue growth, employee retention, operational efficiency, customer satisfaction, market share. The third slide showed my stock accumulation pattern over 23 years, every purchase documented and dated.
The fourth slide showed Charlotte's 3 months as CEO. Expenses increased by 34%. Employee satisfaction down by 23%. 3 major clients requesting contract reviews. 6 senior engineers submitting resignations. I let the numbers speak for themselves. "I didn't call this meeting to embarrass anyone," I said, looking directly at Charlotte. "I called it because Thornfield Technologies is at a critical juncture. The company Richard Hastings founded 40 years ago has evolved into an industry leader. That didn't happen by accident. It happened through strategic planning, operational excellence, and respect for the people who make this company function." Charlotte stood abruptly. "This is character assassination. You're bitter about being fired, so you're using your stock position to..." I'm using my stock position to ensure the company's stability, I interrupted, my voice steady. Which is exactly what a majority shareholder should do. Please sit down, Charlotte. The authority in my voice surprised even me. Charlotte sat. I continued. I'm not here to take your job. I'm not interested in being CEO. I never have been. I'm an operations person. I build systems, manage processes, ensure efficiency. That's what I'm good at, and that's where I add value. Then what do you want? Charlotte asked, her voice a mixture of anger and confusion. I want what's best for Thornfield Technologies, and I have a proposal. I pulled up the final slide. Charlotte remains CEO, but with an adjusted structure. I return as Chief Operating Officer, responsible for all operational functions, with guaranteed contract terms that prevent termination without board approval and documented cause. We bring in an experienced CFO to replace the one Charlotte was planning to terminate next week, someone with 20-plus years of experience, not a consulting friend from business school. We implement a 6-month evaluation period where all major decisions require board review, and we invest in leadership development for Charlotte, including executive coaching and mentorship from industry veterans. The room was silent.
Charlotte stared at me. You're giving me a second chance? After I fired you? Called you luggage? I'm giving the company stability. You're part of that equation. You have good instincts buried under inexperience and overconfidence. Richard saw potential in you, or he wouldn't have made you CEO. I'm willing to trust his judgment, with appropriate safeguards. Natalie Brooks spoke up. This is an incredibly generous proposal, Evelyn, but I have to ask, what happens if Charlotte refuses? What happens if the arrangement doesn't work? If Charlotte refuses, I'll call for a vote to remove her as CEO and install an interim leader while we conduct a proper executive search. If she accepts, but the arrangement doesn't work, if we can't find a functional working relationship after 6 months, we revisit the leadership structure. But I genuinely believe this can work. Charlotte has qualities that could make her an excellent CEO. She needs experience, guidance, and humility. I can provide the first two. The third has to come from her. All eyes turned to Charlotte. She sat very still, her expression cycling through emotions: anger, embarrassment, calculation, and finally something that looked like reluctant respect. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you do this? Because someone did it for me. 23 years ago, I was an administrative assistant with ideas above my station. I reorganized the filing system without permission. I rewrote client correspondence to be more professional. I created project tracking spreadsheets when I was supposed to just be scheduling meetings. I overstepped constantly. And Richard Hastings, instead of firing me for insubordination, called me into his office and asked, "Do you want to actually do this job, or do you just want to criticize how it's done?" I told him I wanted to do it. He gave me the chance. That chance changed my life. Charlotte's eyes were shining with unshed tears. "I called you luggage," she whispered. You did, and it was insulting and wrong, and demonstrated poor judgment. But poor judgment can be corrected. Inability to learn cannot. So the question is, are you capable of learning? Charlotte took a shaky breath. I thought I knew everything. I have an MBA from a top program. I've been groomed for this role for years. And I walked in here thinking the people who built this company were obstacles to innovation instead of resources for growth. That was arrogant and stupid. It was, I agreed. But recognizing it is the first step to correcting it. Benjamin Foster spoke up. I move that we accept Evelyn's proposal as presented. Charlotte Hastings remains CEO. Evelyn Torres returns as COO with contract protections. We recruit an experienced CFO, and we implement a 6-month evaluation period with board oversight. Second, said Natalie Brooks. The vote was unanimous. 12 board members, all in favor. Charlotte stood slowly. She walked the length of the boardroom to where I was standing. For a moment,
We just looked at each other. The young CEO who'd nearly destroyed what she'd inherited, and the veteran executive who'd chosen restoration over revenge. Then Charlotte extended her hand. I don't deserve this, but I'm grateful for it, and I'll work to earn your trust. I shook her hand firmly. Good, because we have a lot of work to do. Those consulting reports you commissioned recommended eliminating our R&D department. We need to address that immediately. Charlotte actually laughed, a sound somewhere between relief and disbelief. Can we start tomorrow? I think I need today to process the fact that I just got saved from myself by the woman I fired. Tomorrow works. 9 a.m., my office, which I assume is currently being used as storage. Actually, it's still empty. I couldn't figure out who to give it to. Everyone I suggested, the other executives told me they weren't qualified. I got angry and left it vacant.
Turns out your team was trying to protect you from making more bad decisions. That's a good sign. It means they're invested in your success. The board meeting officially adjourned at 11:15. Board members lingered, some congratulating me on the handling of the situation, others speaking quietly with Charlotte about their expectations for the next 6 months. Lawrence Hammond approached me as I was gathering my materials. That was masterfully done, he said. In 20 years as corporate counsel, I've never seen a majority shareholder handle a situation with such restraint and strategic thinking. I didn't build this company to watch it crumble because of generational conflict. Charlotte will be a good CEO once she learns what she doesn't know. And if she doesn't learn, then I'll make different decisions. But I'm optimistic. I left the building at noon, this time through the front entrance, with my head high and my position secure. My phone was already filling with messages. Employees who'd heard about the board meeting, colleagues from other companies asking what happened, and one text from Jennifer that simply said, "Yes!" The news spread through the tech industry within hours. Fired executive returns as boss of CEO who terminated her, read one headline. Majority shareholder Evelyn Torres offers second chance to CEO who called her luggage, read another. But the most interesting response came from Richard Hastings, who called that evening. You did good, Evelyn. Better than I would have done. Charlotte is your daughter. You would have protected her. I would have enabled her. There's a difference. You protected her by setting boundaries and expectations. That's what she needed. What she's always needed, honestly. I was too soft. She'll figure it out. Because she has you. For what it's worth, I'm glad. I'm glad the company is in capable hands. I'm glad Charlotte has a chance to actually learn leadership instead of just performing it. My first day back as COO was controlled chaos. Charlotte and I met at 9 a.m., as planned. She'd prepared an agenda, a real agenda, with discussion points and questions, not a list of demands and assumptions. I want to understand what I don't know, she said. So I made a list of areas where I think I made mistakes. I'd like your feedback. The list was brutally honest. Hiring unqualified consultants, ignoring institutional knowledge, prioritizing aesthetics over function, making decisions without data, dismissing employee concerns, focusing on innovation without understanding operations. This is a good list, I told her. Self-awareness is the foundation of growth. Let's work through these one at a time. We spent the next 6 months rebuilding what had nearly broken. Charlotte shadowed me in operational meetings, learning how systems functioned. I attended her strategic planning sessions, offering perspective on implementation realities. We brought in Marcus Thompson as CFO, a 50-year-old veteran with experience in 3 successful tech companies and a reputation for financial discipline. We reversed the consulting recommendations, keeping R&D intact and actually increasing investment based on market analysis. We implemented Charlotte's better ideas, updated project management software, enhanced client communication protocols, modernized the employee benefits package, but with operational planning and phased rollouts instead of abrupt changes. Employee satisfaction scores began climbing. Client concerns were addressed and contracts renewed.
The 6 senior engineers who'd submitted resignations withdrew them after meeting with Charlotte, who apologized for the uncertainty and outlined the new stability measures. By month 4, Charlotte was making solid decisions independently. By month 6, she was actively seeking input before finalizing major plans, not because she was forced to, but because she understood the value of collaborative leadership.
The 6-month board evaluation was scheduled for a Thursday in July. Charlotte was nervous. What if they vote me out anyway? She asked the day before. What if 6 months isn't enough to prove I've changed? Then you learn from it and find another opportunity. But Charlotte, look at the numbers. Look at what we've accomplished. The data speaks for itself. The evaluation was thorough. Board members reviewed financial performance, employee metrics, client feedback, and strategic progress. They interviewed department heads, reviewed operational reports, and analyzed market position. The final vote was to continue Charlotte as CEO without the 6-month review restrictions, based on demonstrated growth and effective partnership with operational leadership. Charlotte cried. Professional, competent, growth-oriented Charlotte actually cried in the boardroom. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you, especially Evelyn. I was given a gift I didn't deserve, and I'll spend my career trying to be worthy of it." Natalie Brooks smiled. "You already are. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep learning. Keep partnering with your team. That's all we ask." That evening, Charlotte and I had dinner at a quiet restaurant near the office. Not a working dinner, a celebratory one. "I still can't believe you gave me another chance," Charlotte said, raising her wine glass. "I was awful to you. You were threatened and defensive. You thought you had to prove yourself by eliminating anyone who might challenge you. That's a common mistake for new leaders. How did you avoid making that mistake?" "I started at the bottom. By the time I had any authority, I'd already learned that the people doing the actual work know things executives don't. Respecting that knowledge isn't weakness, it's strategic intelligence." Charlotte set down her glass. "I want you to know I'm not just grateful you kept me a CEO. I'm grateful you taught me how to actually be one. You taught yourself. I just provided the framework." 3 years later, Thornfield Technologies was ranked in the top 10 best places to work in the tech industry. Revenue had grown by 47%. Employee retention was at an all-time high, and we'd launched 2 innovative products that captured significant market share. Charlotte had become the CEO I'd believed she could be: strategic, collaborative, data-driven, and respectful. She still had the confidence and innovation instincts from her youth, but tempered now with wisdom and humility. I remained as COO, doing what I did best: building systems, managing operations, ensuring the company functioned smoothly. I had no desire for the CEO position. I'd never wanted it. I wanted to build things that lasted. On the 3-year anniversary of my return to Thornfield Technologies, Charlotte called an all-hands meeting. The entire company gathered in the main auditorium, the same space where she'd once threatened employees with business evolution and dismissed institutional knowledge. 3 years ago, Charlotte began, I made the worst decision of my professional life. I fired Evelyn Torres, calling her luggage from a previous era. I thought I knew better than everyone else. I thought confidence was the same as competence. I was wrong. The room was silent, employees listening intently. What I didn't know then was that Evelyn was the majority shareholder of this company. She could have destroyed me. Instead, she gave me a chance to learn. Not because I deserved it, but because someone once gave her the same chance. That generosity changed my life. More importantly, it saved this company. Charlotte gestured toward where I was sitting in the front row. "Evelyn, would you come up here?" I stood, confused, and walked to the stage. Charlotte pulled out a framed document. "This is the stock certificate for 5% of my family's holdings in Thornfield Technologies. It's not a gift. You've earned every share through your work, your dedication, and your willingness to build instead of destroy. Thank you for everything." The auditorium erupted in applause, standing ovation. People I'd worked with for decades, people I'd hired and mentored, people whose careers I'd supported, all showing their appreciation. I took the certificate, genuinely moved. I didn't do any of this for recognition. I did it because Thornfield Technologies is worth fighting for. The people here are worth fighting for. Building something meaningful is always worth the effort. Later, in my office, I looked at the certificate. With Charlotte's gift, I now owned 60.3% of the company, unassailable majority control. But I didn't want control. I never had. I wanted partnership. I wanted collaborative leadership. I wanted a company that valued people, that built things that mattered, that understood success is measured not just in profit, but in impact. And 3 years after being called luggage and fired, we had exactly that. Jennifer knocked on my office door, now as my chief of staff rather than administrative assistant. "Another interview request," she said, holding up her tablet. "Business Weekly wants to do a feature on your leadership philosophy." Decline politely. The work speaks for itself. They're calling you the most powerful person in tech that nobody knows about. I smiled. Good. Let's keep it that way. Power isn't about recognition. It's about impact. I turned back to my computer, reviewing the operational reports for the quarter. Strong numbers, stable systems, happy employees, growing market share. This is what 80-hour weeks for 23 years had built. Not a title, not recognition, not revenge when I was wronged. Something better, something lasting. Charlotte had called me luggage, something to be discarded when it was no longer convenient. She was wrong. I was the foundation, and foundations don't crumble. They support everything built upon them. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. We're on our way to 2,000 subscribers, and your support makes these stories possible. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.